Welcome back, everybody. You got Will and I-Man here from the Block Runner, and today we're going to be talking about BitCountry. So, in the last couple of weeks, we've been talking about Polkadot and we've been talking about the metaverse. And as you know, good old Zuckerberg is chimed in into the chat. And so we've been focused on the metaverse for quite some time now. And now that Zuckerberg is getting in, I think everybody else is starting to jump in. So we're going to see a bunch of projects kind of focus on the metaverse. You're going to see like PFP projects, DeFi projects, everything associated to the metaverse. And I think it's the right move for everybody, right? And so now we have BitCountry, and they've just launched on Kusama Parachain. And they're going to be moving to Polkadot pretty soon. And since we've been talking about Polkadot and metaverses, this is like a match made in heaven.
Yeah, as you said, it fits like a glove. Our I guess our channel narrative as of late. These are the two main, at least as of recently, the two main focuses, right? Like the witnessing of Polkadot's ecosystem emerging, seeing new projects onboarding onto that, and then the metaverse, expanding, in all facets, right? Attention, development, everything. Everybody wants to figure out how to contribute to the construction of the metaverse, right? Because it's a very popular narrative now. So it's good. So yeah, this is an interesting project.
Yeah, it is. So in May, they raised $4 million from the usual suspects like Animoca Brands and a bunch of other ones, right? For $4 million in a seed round, that's a lot. That's a lot for a company. And what they're working on is actually pretty cool. I really like what they're working on. And so let's talk about what BitCountry is. So BitCountry is essentially a platform that allows an influencer or an entrepreneur or somebody who has some degree of following to spin up their own metaverse. And the whole idea here is kind of like when you see an influencer on YouTube talking about join our Discord or follow us on Twitter. The next phase in, like, I guess social interaction is going to be join our metaverse. And that's really what they're facilitating, is being able to spin up metaverses relatively quickly. And the way they do that is also pretty interesting. So they have sort of like a governing mechanism to onboard communities onto this network of metaverses. And ultimately it's really to facilitate a way to grow your community, a way for your community to interact with each other in a different way, in a way where we think the metaverse is really going to be like a strong use case of the social experience. And I mean, Zuckerberg talks about that all the time. I mean, Facebook was like really the big social networking platform, and now he thinks that it's going to expand in the metaverse, and I think he's ultimately going to be right. So what's interesting about what BitCountry is doing is kind of like, you can equate that to the internet. The only reason we have millions of websites is because you don't have to code them anymore. You don't need code to make websites anymore. You can use, a lot of the existing platforms to make websites. And in order to facilitate the future of the metaverse, where we think there's going to be millions of them, you can't force people to code their metaverse. And so, the rest of us have the burden of building those tools so that anybody can come in and spin these metaverses up. So that's what they're doing. And let's see. Let me see if I can show you an example of kind of what their world would potentially look like. Turn the sound off. And so just to show you, so we have an avatar kind of running around to the space. And the way that this works is we have a map. Let me see, in Continuum, we have a map that's basically a 2D grid, and each of these squares is its own metaverse, right? So you can imagine these being all different influencers. And the whole idea here is that whenever you, as an influencer, create this metaverse, you can have an ERC20 that you can import, right? If you have an existing ERC20, you can spin one up and through this platform, and then you kind of allow the community to purchase the land and start creating content and start interacting with each other. So yeah, I mean, I think this is a viable project to really get the metaverse like really kickstarted in terms of like having, you know, thousands or hundreds potentially of metaverses being spun up. So I think that's my favorite part, just because now, you know, anyone with a following can really spin up this metaverse in a kind of like a very easy way. So, and then most importantly, they've launched on Kusama and they're on their way to launching on Polkadot. So they were the 14th parachain to be onboarded onto Kusama. So you can expect very similar numbers onto Polkadot, pretty much. So they haven't really released that schedule yet when they expect to get onto Polkadot, but you can expect that that's going to be happening pretty soon.
Yeah, I think it's just too early right now. They're still working through, like, you know, the top 10, which they have. The top 10 have made their presence publicly known. They're all competing right now, as we speak, for these first few parachain slots. So it's going to take a month or maybe a few months for the top 10 to be figured out. And then from that point on, we're going to see more. Yeah, I would categorize these as like more interesting, not necessarily like DeFi primitive projects, like start to make their presence known, trying to onboard communities and stuff like that. Because the metaverse, as important as it's going to be in the future, it's still not really the main narrative or like the main primitive for like blockchain ecosystems. It's more of like an extrapolation layer on top of, you know, the crypto blockchain primitives that need to exist beforehand, right? Like, then you can start constructing metaverses with real economies on top of. So yeah, I think you're right. I think it's going to probably land somewhere within the 10 to 20 range, right? Just like they did on Kusama.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And if you were to, I guess, wonder, you know, what project is BitCountry the most similar? I guess I would say that it's the most similar to Sandbox. So the way that Sandbox works is that they essentially have a map, and then you can purchase land from that map and then kind of deploy whatever content that you want through their builder system, which is pretty robust. I mean, you can pretty much make almost any type of game through their builder application that they have and spin up a bunch of NFTs. And it's similar here in BitCountry, where you have like I showed you before, you have like this map, and then once you're onboarded into what they call the continuum, then you have the ability to sell pieces of that land to your community, and then have the community construct, you know, whatever it is that they can construct using what I believe to be a similar builder mechanism to what Sandbox has. So it seems like it's the best approach to having the most metaverses being onboarded, just because you're not going to have developers, you know, every time to build up a metaverse. So it makes the most sense. The token that they have here is called, I guess, Continuum. It's NUUM. And this is the one that's going to be on Polkadot. The one on Kusama is called Pioneer, or Near. And they have a very Kusama-oriented distribution, very public, right? And then typically, if you do research on the Kusama projects versus the Polkadot projects, the Polkadot version of the tokenomics, and it's in the token economics, is very similar to the structure of typical crypto projects, right? There's a percentage for the founding, there's seed allocation, there's early investor allocation, ecosystem programs, and so forth. And of course, they have a foundation. So there's a governing mechanism here to decide what to do with these funds as the community grows.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's obviously like they're going to have two mirror ecosystems, I guess, deployed on both networks, most likely. So I think that's the value of Kusama, right? Like, that's why they allocate more heavily towards community, like whenever it comes to token distribution, because it's more community driven as opposed to like relying on the founding members of any, you know, project, organization, whatever you want to call it. But so the development team's focus is probably going to be on the Polkadot version of this BitCountry ecosystem, most likely, or maybe not. Maybe they'll do a lot of experimentation on the Kusama version of it, just because that's kind of the nature of how, you know, Polkadot and Kusama work, right? Kusama's what's their tagline again? Embrace the chaos or something like that. It's chaotic, right? It's an experimental playground to test like economic assumptions and stuff like that. So
Mm-hmm.
that's not really to say anything negative. It's just,
no,
I guess
that's the best part about Polkadot is Kusama, is that if you're a project trying to leverage Polkadot's technology, well, you launch on Kusama and test your assumptions. And I think that's the best part. That's the best part of like building on this network. And
so because we think it's probably going to take a few months before they secure their Polkadot parachain slot, most likely they're probably already in the process of, you know, the launching the live version of the Genesis metaverse, right? To at least like bring people in and you know, again, test these assumptions, see how everything works, because that's the point. Right now they have this time to kind of like, you know, work out all the kinks before Polkadot version goes live, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
looking for that.
And here's a good kind of visual representation of what the metaverses that you're going to be able to spin up looks like. So you have that map that I was talking about earlier, and each square represents its own metaverse, which is subdivided into these little squares that you can sell to your community.
And they're called blocks, right?
Blocks, yeah.
And Decentraland, they're called parcels. I wonder, what are they called in Sandbox?
That's a good question.
Let's just call it land.
Yeah.
But this is the first one I've seen like a first metaverse project called in blocks. You know, I mean, I guess because it kind of like, you know, it is a 3-dimensional block, even though you're viewing these things on a 2-dimensional plane. But once you actually get in there, it's a block of space, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there's another dimension to account for. So
not only that, it's a voxel based system as far as we can tell. So and so you're going to be able to sell these little blocks here. Actually, the subdivisions are land units. So the block itself is the metaverse, I believe. Map of land blocks. Well, something like that. So ultimately, you could sell these little parcels to people, right, to your community.
Yep.
And so this is supposed to kind of like allow the creator or the influencer or whatever who's creating this metaverse to kind of build out a theme or build out some sort of function within the metaverse and actually fund creation into you know, the community making content in that world. So it's a very smart kind of layout, and especially since you don't need developers to make stuff, then, you know, it seems kind of straightforward. So looks like the supply of total land blocks is 100,000 land blocks. Future supply of inflation will be determined by the governance and Genesis Council. And land block allocation is 10% private. Ecosystem growth 10%. Public NFT sales 7%. And treasury 73%. And here we talk about subdividing. So looks like one land block can be subdivided into 100 land units. So that's interesting. So now users with land will have mining power for bit. So yeah, that's another token that they have in along with their other two. So you have the Kusama, you have the Polkadot, and then you have the ability to mine this bit token through the mining mechanism based on how much land or how many blocks you have in that metaverse. So here's the equation, but ultimately it's a way to create an economy in the world where in that economy you can spend those bits in order to generate, you know, some other activity within that land. So it's pretty smart. And most importantly, I think this is just one mechanism to build out what the metaverse is going to become. And it's very quickly looking like the metaverse is no longer a place I'm in. It is more like a point in time. And we're going to see tons of metaverses of like different flavors, different kinds. And I think that's the best part.
Yeah, I think it is clear now. I think we've been saying that for a while. I don't know if that's like something radical to have been saying. I don't know if the mass like metaverse zeitgeist understanding was like somehow Decentraland was going to be the metaverse. I don't think that was.
Well, I think when they think of metaverse, most people think of Ready Player One as a place. And even though the place is pretty big in Ready Player One, it's still a place. And I don't think it's a place, really.
Well, it's like a collective of different places and you know, spaces, right? Like that is the metaverse. So just any one metaverse project like Decentraland has the potential to scale into like this monstrous ecosystem of places, right? Like just because there's 90,000 parcels today doesn't mean if Decentraland explodes and there's millions of users, all of a sudden there's not enough space to build things into, you know.
Yeah, but you know what? That comes with like expectations, right? We sort of talked about this before, but if you're in Decentraland and you have this avatar, and then all of a sudden you jump into Big Country and you're a different avatar, I don't know if that's really comparable to what's going on in Ready Player One, where everything's interconnected. There's the same avatar. Of course, you can change your avatar in Ready Player One, but it's still the same sort of like, I guess, entity. But ultimately, if you can just change your avatar, then what difference does it make that your avatar looks different in Big Country than it does in Decentraland?
Yeah.
So it's interesting. Like I don't think I don't think the metaverse is going to be defined by anything really. It's just activities that you do on the internet, really.
Yeah, it is hard to pinpoint like clear definitions this early on, and you know, it's probably like ego driven. I don't know, like somebody trying to be like the main narrative driver of like this is what the metaverse is going to be.
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think it's healthier to approach it and like, yeah, nobody really knows, right? But no matter what, like projects like this is contributing nonetheless.
For sure.
Like anybody who's doing something to build some kind of experience or some kind of ecosystem that incentivizes people to create and to exist in these virtual shared spaces, like you're doing something, right? And this is the metaverse. Like this is contribution to that effort.
Yep.
And then 10, 20, 30 years from now, we could look back and be like, oh, okay, yeah, like that's how this happened, right? Like little projects like this started this, then it gets adopted by X project down the road, you know, things like this. Like we're just building layers on top of one another, right? So, but I like your sandbox comparison because I think it is eerily similar, like as far as, you know, for one, the voxel nature of creation. I mean, it's a widely popular metaverse creation model just because I think it's just easier to develop that. It's easier for like a landowner to leverage as a creation process. It doesn't require like complex 3D modelers to, you know, have like this imagination to create these things and deploy them onto land. Like it's just easier. It's more accessible, but
what I was going to show here,
the thing that's different. The thing that's different between Sandbox and this new project is I think the land distribution mechanic, which is the most interesting to me because the Sandbox is kind of like, as cool as it is, it's definitely a very centralized ecosystem in the sense that, you know, the creators of this metaverse, they just kind of poop out these land distributions whenever they want, right? Yep. Here's this giant chunk of land, guys. We're going to sell them $50-$60 a pop. There's like, I don't know, 10,000 parcels. Have at it.
Yeah.
And they're kind of leveraging that as a fundraising mechanic and just, you know, they're just expanding this metaverse maybe beyond like the need of expansion, right? Like, do they really need hundreds of thousands of land parcels this early? Maybe not. So Big Country kind of like is developed a much more automated system, and it's influenced more by actual activity within the ecosystem, right? And governance participation to determine whether or not we need to expand from this point or not.
Yeah, that's right.
So I like that. I appreciate that attempt, you know?
Yeah, and if let's say that Big Country is improving on like the land distribution model from Sandbox. I don't know if you checked iMan, but Sandbox is neck and neck with Decentraland in terms of market cap.
Yeah, I've been keeping my eye, dude. Yeah. I've definitely been keeping my eye. Yeah, I'm not surprised just because, you know, Sandbox, whether it's centralized or not, right? Like those are the two competing narratives right now in the metaverse space, like a centralized metaverse and a decentralized one. Mm-hmm. Nothing starts out decentralized because that's too difficult to do. Of course, like, and Sandbox probably has, you know, plans in mind how to eventually pass over the keys to the community into the future. So right early on, they should be making all these big, you know, platform decisions and driving and onboarding of the community. But
yeah, and just kind of talking about like the speculative side, if Sandbox is around $4 billion and we have Big Country kind of starting off in the Polkadot ecosystem, have that, which is arguably a very great place to start, as a project, then, $4 billion, like there's a huge opportunity there. Now, you can't get the tokens yet because it hasn't really launched, but that's why we're talking about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, that's been Big Country. I think we covered everything that we wanted to in kind of explaining what Big Country is, the whole point in their in spinning up metaverses. So if you guys have any questions, let us know in the comment section below. Make sure you like and subscribe and follow us on Twitter at The Block Runner and also at MetaZone.io. And then we'll catch you on the next video.
Peace out.